Welcome back to the Divergent AF podcast, and I am your host, Selena Thompson, back for season 3. If you've been following along and listening and watching since I first started this podcast, you would know that I had a little bit of a break or a hiatus nearly 3 months ago. And let me tell you, it's really hard to get back into something when you've kind of had such a break. So just bear with me if I just am not as natural and I'm not really on my A game, my version of my A game, really. Anyway, I have so many topics that I plan to talk about, not just, me talking to myself, but I have so many amazing guests and friends that are coming on. But you know what ADHD people are like? We're just really hard to pin down, We make the big plans, and especially towards the end of the year, stuff happens. And yeah, but anyway, I I was planning to talk about another topic, or kicking off season 3 to talk about another topic. Had it all planned out, and then life just happened today. And I just feel like it's a topic or it's an experience that a lot of us can relate to. And that is regulating one's emotions. And I know that I've spoken about this before, but I think, especially over the last 3 months, I've really, really come to dial in my emotional regulation techniques and practices. And I firmly 100% believe that who regulates rules, pretty much, whether it come to conflict, relationships, work, family, interactions, just anything. If you can be the calmest person in the room or in an interaction, you're going to win. And it's taken me this long to really learn how valuable that skill is. And it is really hard for us. And I know it's really hard for us. And it's going to be something that I am constantly going to have to battle and be aware of and just try and improve, because I've just seen the results of changing my behavior vastly from my standard operating behavior, and seeing the results and the outcomes from being just so stable table is just so worth it. So anyway, the last minute decision to change the topic of this episode was really based upon being triggered. I hate that word, but I don't really know what other word you would use. Agitated, triggered, set off like a bomb, set off. Or having your buttons pushed, actually. Having your buttons pushed and being set off. Wound up, triggered, you get the gist. And just the second half of my day being consumed with me getting on top of my emotions or trying to regulate myself. And it made me realize just how much of our lives or our days are spent trying to regulate or failing at regulating and exploding. And it's such a real experience, and unless you live this life, you just can't explain it to normal people. I mean, I can just think of so many examples in my life where I've just blown an opportunity, whether it be an exam or work or an interview or, anything important, really. If something was happening in the background, it would just be ruined, and I can just look back on photos and look at, oh yeah, something was happening there or something was happening there. And it was actually like a really horrible day and a really horrible time. And I couldn't even concentrate on the joy that was happening in that moment. And it's such a shame. So over the last 3 months especially, I have been learning more about what sets me off, so my triggers, and what methods kind of best work for me to try and get a handle on it and keep operating and not let it just throw out the rest of the day or the week or whatever. And while I'm not proclaiming to be a master at regulating emotions, I don't think that that's a realistic goal for any of us. I can definitely say that I have come a hell of a long way, especially in the last 3 months, than what I used to be. In fact, I actually let a lot of things go that I would never have let go in the past. And that's kind of just weighing up a little analysis of, is this worth my time or energy? How upset am I going to get? Who's it against? Am I going to need this person in the future? Are they going to be a useful ally or resource? All these things, you can just kind of process in about a minute before I fire. And I do have techniques, but it's not perfection because that's just how we're wired. We're passionate people. I know me especially, I have massive emotions, massive. And it's great because you can be so happy and joyful over really small things. But then, what goes up must come down. I know you get what I mean. And, it's taken me years and years and years to try and accept and love having big emotions. And getting over the whole stigma and the label of being, sensitive and overreacting or something like that. And just really realizing that most people who are saying that just don't even understand you and just don't bother. And the people that get it and love you for it, it won't matter to them. And I'm finding that the people that are like that are fellow neurodivergent people. And it just makes life really easy when you're around people with the same kind of brain. I also think what has been the most interesting and eye-opening kind of experience to speed this awareness up is having a partner that also has ADHD and kind of looking at like a mirror in many ways. And basically, we're both just working towards regulating our emotions like on the daily. But it's funny when you can stand back and you can see someone getting worked up over a really minor inconvenience, and you're just like, "What? What's your problem, bro?" But then when it's you, it's a different story. Okay. And yeah, that's been quite fun watching that and just coming to so much awareness of that this is such a thing. It is such a life. And working out strategies that, work for different people in terms of getting on top of your bloody emotions. And it just kind of blows my mind that emotional regulation is still not a component in an ADHD diagnosis in terms of the DSM-5. And if you've ever, watched any of Dr. Russell Barclay's content or read any of his papers or things like that, he is a really big advocate for including emotional regulation or dysregulation as basically the core component for ADHD. And I personally completely agree with it. Because when I think about basically all the other symptoms, it can all be tied back to regulation or dysregulation. So, attention, you're not able to regulate your attention. We've got a lot of attention. We just can't really focus it where we want to focus it at all times and things like that. And I just want to say it's actually not our fault. There's obviously a reason why we are wired this way. And while we can all try our goddamn best at trying to assimilate into, what's a normal reaction to things like that, we're not always going to get it right. And if we can just take out some of the shame attached to it and just laugh at yourself more, it definitely helps. So anyway, back to the reason why I decided to just yap about this topic. I have just wasted, half a day just embroiled in my head, going over and over and over again what was said, what I said, just feeling like the rage and the injustice, and then the sadness, and then the guilt, and just all these things that it kind of stirred up. And I guess I haven't had a moment of being really wounded, I think, in, yeah, maybe 3 months. So I have just been really smooth sailing. And I mean, I always knew, or I always know that, shit's going to pop up. Shit always does pop up. But it's been very calm, and so calm that I actually have just been resting and sleeping and slowing down a lot. And I realized that I'd been living in a state of just complete overdrive, fight or flight for, I don't know, too long, years. And it's been quite a cushy, kind of easy, simple existence, I guess. And you kind of forget about this stuff. So because I've just wasted a whole day, trying to get on top of my emotions. And I'm going to talk about what I did to, get through it. So anyway, going back to the reason why I wanted to just yap about this subject today, because it's just so relevant. I had planned out what I was going to talk about, what I was going to record, had all my ducks in a row. I've got duckling trauma. We won't go there though today. And then something happens, because life happens and you can't control people's actions and words. And because of that, I've been thrown into a mode of trying not to ruin people's lives and my own, and also trying to just regulate my nervous system back to resting state, which has been in for the last 3 months. And I really like it. I really like that space. And I know that this is just such a common, daily probably experience for us all. So I thought, let's just keep it real. This is what I try and do here, as real as pos. So I know a lot of us have big emotions. I know that I do. I remember hearing that emotional dysregulation is really more an overreaction to something that would kind of annoy or upset, a rational, normal person. So it's not like you have really imagined it in your head, unless, you're going into the kind of the RSD, which can happen as well for us. But I'm talking about, someone has slighted you or harmed you or wounded you, and it would upset and make, a rational person angry. It's quite justifiable. But we just kind of take it up a few notches, and not by choice, might I add. It is absolutely not by choice. Hence the methods of trying to regulate. For example, I can look back through my school reports and I can see periods where I completely bombed out on my exams, and, I either failed or barely passed. And, they're like clusterfucks throughout the year or the years. And I remember, like, oh, that's when my boyfriend broke up with me, or that's when I was being bullied, or that's when I started this new school. I can like absolutely see the progression of when shit was going down. And I just couldn't focus on doing schoolwork. And I have so many of those kind of stories, whether it's in a work setting or university setting, or, you're going to, a wedding or a baby shower, and something like horrific has just happened. And, in your interpersonal life, and I can look back on photos and be like, I was holding that together. And all I could think about was just don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And it is a really hard life, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I also wonder how much more productive we would be if this wasn't such an Achilles heel for us, because I really believe it is. If we did not have this core component, well, I believe it to be a core component, which is trouble managing and regulating emotions, can you imagine how unstoppable we would be? It's almost like we all are walking around with throttle controls on our motorcycle brains. And if we didn't have them, we would win the race, we would rule. So one of the big lessons that I have come to finally accept and grapple with is that, people can do and say things to you, whether there's malicious intent or not. And you just can't control it and you can't stop it. And the only thing that you can attempt to try and change is your behavior and your reactions. And that is where the work comes in, the self work, the self improvement. And it is something that I try and work on every single day, because the results that I've had, especially in the last 3 months of coming away from a situation, especially a conflict, and being the one that was able to be the most calm and the most regulated, has just been indescribable. And because I've seen and had such good things happen to me from being able just to, handle the jandal, keep my cool, just makes this worth it, even though it is extremely hard and I'm still working on it. And I will just tell you some of the things that work for me. And I know that everyone is different, 100%. But I think once you can kind of have a little, mental list, you definitely don't have to write it down because we don't like writing things down. But if you've kind of got a little mental list of what can help you, and working down the list, and then it's just practice. And then when you get a good result from a conflict or a situation, that's dopamine, and that'll keep you going. So some of the ones that I would fall back into, and then this is another thing, I always kind of gauge the intensity of how intense I'm feeling about a situation. How upset am I? How angry am I? And then I'll kind of, match the appropriate kind of method to trying to handle it. So for me, walking is just something that I would love to be able to fit in every day, at least for an hour. I don't know what it is about walking, but I think it's just almost like you go into like autopilot because you don't really need to think when you walk. And I just put my phone on do not disturb and I listen to music, and it's almost like I leave all that feeling and emotion behind me, and I almost kind of just feel like I can work through things when I'm moving. I feel the same way about driving. So a long drive. So if it's, nighttime or it's raining, then I would go for a drive and I'll just drive, um, in a loop around Auckland pretty much. And it's just something about movement for me. But really, yeah, autopilot kind of movement where you're thinking things through, and things just become a bit more clearer for me in terms of, okay, is this an appropriate response? Should I be this angry or should I be this upset? I don't know. That's what works for me. And definitely putting my phone away or do not disturb, because at that point I don't need to be pissed off by someone else by accident, or someone just interrupting the process, I think. Another thing that I have, learned to love is journaling. Sounds so like journaling. You know what I mean? Just journaling, writing it down, or getting my notes app out and just almost writing down what I would love to say, but not sending it, because it just gets it out. And that makes you feel so much better. Just make sure, you don't send it, or no one can read it. No one can read my journals. They're very private. um, and that has just been a way of getting my stream of consciousness out. And it's really funny sometimes when, you go back and look on like what you've written, maybe a few weeks or the day before. And it's like, wow, I was savage. Thank God I didn't act. So yeah, walking, driving, journaling, and also cold plunge sauna. So I think they call that contrast therapy. So I I'll admit I actually haven't been doing it a lot lately, and I should be doing it. But again, it's this whole thing of, you get into a habit and then suddenly your flow stops, and it's quite a lot to try and get your train back on the track. But that to me is just like a sweet spot. I don't know. I think it's because when your body is, in extreme pain or shutting down, like it might get hypothermia, I'm not really thinking about emotions, or I'm not really upset. I don't have time. My body is like, we need to keep you alive. You're either overheating or you're freezing. And it's just like bliss for me. It's like a vacation for my brain. And if you haven't tried it, you should try it. And I'm sold. I mean, I actually went along with it. I went along to trying contrast therapy for the first time very cynical, because I'm like, try me, this is pretty strong. And I'm telling you, it is a vacation for me, and I come out having just a completely different perspective. So actually, I need to get my ass back in there, because it definitely helps. And then I feel like the effects of it even carry on for the next few days. It's not just that day or in that moment. So that's one of my top faves that I need to get back into. Another thing that I have practiced doing is, if it's, an email or a message or a phone call, I will use all my willpower not to respond right away. And if it's kind of something formal and it's an email or a message, or, something a bit more serious, I will definitely sleep on it, and I will, kind of write it out, and I'll sleep on it, because I'm telling you, you can be a different person the next day, different. And, how many times have you had those moments where you've just fired something back, or you've gotten into this, fight, and it's late at night, and then the next day you wake up and you just have this the shame hangover of, wow, you're a bit psycho, justified, but just quite passionate. And yeah, I mean, I've gone through that so many times that I finally learnt my lesson. Um, and I think something that has always stayed in my head is the whole notion of, don't put anything in writing unless you want it read out in court. And I've always carried that through my whole life, being passed down from lawyer family. And I would urge you to do the same. Yeah, you can go off and stuff like that, but just always remember that, like, writing is writing. And a VM is the same. Don't do that. Do you know what I mean? And that always kind of guides me really well. I always stop and think, what would this look like if someone read this out? Does this read completely irrational and aggressive? And that has just always been able to sway and turn around my response. And I kind of love that. So hopefully that helps you guys, because it has always helped me to stop and think as a third party observer looking in, being like, does this person sound, like they've got capacity, the things that they're writing and saying? I'm telling you, it saves you all the time to look back and just have no shame about how you have acted towards someone, whether that's been, sadness or betrayal or anger or anything like that. Yeah, I would definitely recommend having that mindset. And then, of course, one of my favorite things to do is have a shower cry. You know how shower cries just hit different? It's like it didn't happen, because you're in the water already. And, if you get good enough at it, no one can even hear you. Um, and that's just kind of a last option resort when I just can't keep my feelings in anymore. And I don't know about you, everyone is different, but my default big emotion is to cry and get really upset. I don't really go into anger, like rage anger, as much as I would just cry and break down and almost freeze. I do that more, especially to kind of minor things, which, minor things happen all the time. So yeah, I can highly recommend a shower cry, especially at night, and then crawling into bed and then just passing out and then just forgetting that day ever happened. Yeah, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I know that that shower cries, they're just the final boss of cries. Another option that, kind of depends on the scenario for me is talking to friends, obviously. I don't do it as much as I used to do it just because I kind of have a mindset now where, sometimes people can give you advice and they, often they have good intentions. Some people maybe don't, but if they're your really good friends, by accident, they will give you advice. And sometimes the advice is not really aligning with what you are thinking in your head because they're actually not in that situation and you've just told them a snippet. And in my opinion, that just confuses me more. So I kind of pull back and I might have one or two people that just know me inside and out that I can talk to about anything. And they are just the kind of people that don't judge, don't tell me what to do. It's just like, you'll know what to do. And it's just there to listen and validate. And that's so important. But with other people that maybe don't know me as well or just kind of have the tendency of like, oh, you can't do that, or like, you shouldn't put up with that, or you should do this, you should. No, no, that doesn't work for me personally. That actually just really confuses me. And I'm really big on now just digging in and listening to my intuition and just going with my instinct of how I think something should be handled. And that for me has been working out better than other situations where, you go to so many people and you get different opinions and some people are fiery and some people are not. And it's just confusing. So yeah, there's a couple friends that I would talk to, but again, that would only be kind of major inconveniences, not really minor, because minors are just all the time, right? So, I mean, I've got so many other methods. I just thought I would touch on a few of them. What I found really helpful for me was figuring out my triggers or what wounds and what really upsets me, basically, what like picks off the scab of something that will just never heal. And identifying what it is and then just knowing or just having the tools and just practicing them for how you can just get over it. Um, Honestly, I have come such a long way. A couple of the good friends that I spoke to today said this to me. I just used to get so wounded, and it would just set me back for days, and it would just get in the way of my life and work and friendships. And I mean, it was really horrible stuff, not discounting that, but it was really just coming to grips with the reality that there are certain people in the world that get to learn what sets you off and they learn how to push your buttons. And that's just a reality of life, unfortunately. And it's always seems to be the ones that were really close to you. Um, and they kind of use it as ammunition down the track. And that's just a fact of life. You can't change people, you can't change what they're going to do. I mean, yeah, it's really sad and it's cruel that there are people that do that. But if you can beat them at their own game, then that's all you need. And that was what I had to change. Being stuck in a loop of being wounded and just not being able to show up effectively in my life and be happy. And I mean, if I'm honest, there was, a good part of the year where I just didn't want to wake up in the morning. Just not because I didn't want to be here, I just didn't want to go through another day of pain and hurt, and just existing really was painful. And I know that that's not, an isolated kind of experience. And if you know that feeling, then you'll know how hard it is just to kind of show up in life when you're dealing with a lot of pain. So that was what I had to do to kind of get out of that loop was, okay, the the actions and the behavior aren't stopping. I can't change the situation. And I just feel like I'm running into a brick wall all the time. So what can I change? And it was my reactions and behavior. And let me tell you, it's bloody hard and it's still a work in progress, but I've come such a long way and I'm not stopping. And I hope that by just sharing, just the realness of this and being vulnerable about it and how, it's still a real big struggle for me. And I know it will be. I think it just goes hand in hand with being a highly sensitive person, having a lot of empathy, being a really loving person, being really kind and caring. It's just kind of part and parcel, and it's just who I am. And I know a lot of women, especially that I talk to, on the DMs, a lot of them I haven't met in real life, and we have, connections and friendships, and it's beautiful. And we're all kind of the same. And it's just something that we work through. So I'll wrap this little ramble up here. I just hope that everything I've shared, you've just been able to take something away from it that can help you, even if it's just the fact that you don't feel as alone and you realize that this is a really normal experience for all of us. We may not talk about it all the time. I know there's kind of a stigma attached to our big emotions and our reactions, and especially around neurotypicals, that's really difficult. But I'm just here to let you know it's not just you, and I am always trying, and if I come across anything that helps me, then I just want to share it and hopefully it can help someone else. Okay, thank you for listening. I am happy to be back, and I have so many good topics to share in the coming episodes, and hopefully, life won't happen and shit won't blow up and I won't spend all day trying to regulate my emotions. So thanks for joining me for kicking off season 3, and I will see you the next episode.